Happy Friday, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the SurgeCast podcast. Today with me, I have the Director of SEO and ASO from Albertsons Companies, Derek Wu.
Hey, it's great to be here, Shane. Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you. Number one, Derek, I told you this offline, but you have like the voice of a movie voiceover person. Do you have any background in that?
I used to do a little bit of radio speaking, and I did local sports broadcasting and things like that. But ultimately, it was from being a speech and debate person, and I think that the voice kind of just naturally came through the way it is. To me, it's a little bit freaky. When I hear my own voice, I'm always like, "How does it sound like that?" So, for me, hey, I've never gotten used to my own sound on recording. In my own head, I sound quite a bit different. So if that helps any is a bit of an answer to that. I get that a lot, and I don't hear it myself. So it's always interesting to me when people make that comment because it does sound quite a bit different inside of my own head. And I think you know the feeling when you've heard recordings of yourself. You just don't realize how you sound.
Absolutely. But I hate the way I sound on recordings, but you actually have a cool one. So, you got to take the wins where you can get them. But
I guess if it helps any, just so you know, when I hear my own voice, it still freaks me out because I don't think I sound like that. But I completely get what you mean. Completely get what you mean.
So it's interesting you said that you would have some history in some radio, which is really cool. But I think what my takeaway is more of the debate and background. You probably didn't know it then, but that's actually probably super beneficial for you when it comes into, an in-house SEO position like you currently have, and getting your points across for things like probably like budgeting, strategy, then just implementation of things that why you believe that it is the right choice to make. Do you find that to be true?
Yeah, I think the speech and debate background, because it was such a highly competitive activity, and because of the school I went to competed on a national stage where we won a national title in back-to-back years while I was there, had a lot of different benefits that I feel carried through to SEO. Largely, the style of argumentation and certainly being able to get your point across, but being able to outline well-supported set of points, a well-taglined and memorable set of points, I suppose. And so all of those things, how you position your words linguistically, how you transition out of points, how you label taglines, how you keep them nice and short and memorable, and just working through that outlined format, whether you're writing out something for a PowerPoint deck or you're doing an oral presentation. All of those things came in handy, and I think also just in sorting out your own thoughts, it really helps focus coherently the things that you would like to get across to people. So yeah, I'm in full agreement that I think as an activity it was one of the more habit forming and one of the ones that really left the deepest impression on me in terms of the tools that I carry forward as a professional.
I think that's super well said. And oftentimes, SEO is such a black box to whether it's a business owner or whether it's your leadership team, wherever you are. And everyone at this point knows they need it. They know it's important, but they don't understand it. So I think the fact that you can take those outlines, like you said, and take those strategies, make them bite-sized morsels where everyone can digest it, or it becomes a memorable tidbit of a meeting. Man, that is so powerful. How long have you been doing SEO?
Since 1998. So a little bit
right before Google, so no big deal.
Just a little before Google launched, actually. So you can consider me a dinosaur. I started doing SEO when it wasn't really called that. There was just Yahoo, and it was trying to get to the top of Yahoo. And that's when I started doing it, really. There things like Metacrawler and Web Crawler and Yahoo and Lycos and Hotbot and Dogpile, stuff like that were the search engines of choice. I don't know if you remember Hotbot and or Alta Vista, Lycos.
I remember Alta Vista a little bit. I remember Ask Jeeves a little bit.
Sure.
I think someone on, well, what used to be Twitter, now it's X, had a funny thread that was basically, ChatGPT is just Ask Jeeves in 2022.
That's great. Ask Jeeves, I think, was a little ahead of its time. Conceptually, I think it was right on. I don't think the technology was there, for it to be exactly what it hoped to be. But I think conceptually it was ahead of its time.
Yeah, I don't know if you play any video games, but I think the Sony PSP was kind of like that, right? It was just ahead of its time, where now like the Nintendo Switch is basically what the PSP hoped to be. It was just like 10
Yeah,
years too early, right? So that kind
yeah.
of thing does happen, which is super interesting.
I still think the Neo Geo is the most underrated system of all time. That thing was fantastic for debuting in 1990. And I don't know if you remember the Neo Geo. I'm again dating myself with Lycos Hotbot and Neo Geo, but still.
I can't say that I'm honestly familiar with Neo Geo. Was it a cartridge system or was it discs or?
It was a cartridge-based system, but if you look at it compared to the 8-bit systems that were out during its time, it was pretty earth-shattering in terms of what it was doing compared to everything else. Just that price point at $900 in
Oh
1990 was
my
a little bit
god.
high compared to the 126, I think, that the Nintendo Power Set was debuting at.
Yeah, technology's just come a long way. I remember the first big screen TV was obviously it was massive. It was like this massive 600 pound system, and it was like what $5,000, and it was just like picture
Yeah.
wasn't that great. But at the time, you're like, oh my god, I can't imagine it getting better than this, right? And part of me wonders, it's kind of like when the internet first came out and people could search for, whatever it is, like a recipe at the time. That was the coolest thing, or virtual mail, email, right? Like that's the
Yeah.
coolest thing. You don't need to stamp anymore. You can just get the message, and
Yeah.
uh, I think there's a parallel path somewhere when it comes to digital marketing, right? It's just how much better can it get? Does AI
Mhm.
help it? Does it hurt it? Where does that evolve to? So those are all interesting conversations. But you have an interesting job because you do both the SEO and the apps and the App Store optimization. Are you finding that the App Store stuff, like maybe some of the outdated tactics of SEO, are actually still relevant when it comes to optimizing to the App Store, or is the App Store catching up in terms of the algorithm and how they're ranking things?
I think on some level, yeah, you have simpler controls that have to address a lot more. So you have a much, much smaller amount that you can affect with an App Store optimization and a lot of different masters that would like for the app to reflect many different things, especially when you're a grocery store that has a pharmacy, for example, and then you've got a loyalty program, and then you've got coupons, then you've got the actual commerce, then it starts to become a question of how much can you fit health and pharmacy versus grocery while also making sure you're covering loyalty as an app and coupons and deals. And we have very neat recipe tools as well. And it's very hard to represent all of those things fit well with the small amount of space that you're given. But if you're good with the text and the graphics and things like that are on that home screen, it does tend to help. And then there are other interesting things that Google and Android are doing with promotional content and the like, and I'm pretty impressed with that piece where it's a little bit of a hybrid because you can design an ad, but it's not like a paid ad really. It's just promotional content for things featured inside of the app, which has been a very interesting and fun and large volumes of traffic tend to come with it if you're good at crafting promotional material that you want to share on the Android platform. So that's been something that we found from an organic end in 2023 has been quite successful for us and pretty exciting. And I do believe you have to be at a certain threshold to have promotional content unlocked as a tool for
Right.
you. And that's one of the caveats is it's not there for everyone. If you're one of the companies that does have access to it, I implore you to use it because it is a lot of organic traffic just for showing up and highlighting a feature within your app.
Free pro tip from Derek Wu, right? That is super helpful. If you hit that content threshold, take advantage of every opportunity that you have. I think that makes a ton of sense. So you've been in the game for a very long time, not pre-Google, right? Anybody pre-Google is definitely an OG, right? What do you think? What do you think from back then until now? Has anything remained consistent? Like, this still works today?
Mhm.
Obviously, there's a lot of stuff that has changed, or a lot of stuff that you stay away from. But what are some things that maybe still irrelevant from back, pre Google till life after with Google.
Sure. I think that really it's the metadata that has not changed a lot. If you're pointing to one mechanic that has stayed pretty tried and true through the years, it's having a pretty good title tag and a well-written meta description. Now I know those are very basic concepts as it comes to SEO, but crafting those well, crafting them carefully was the name of the game back then. Still very relevant, although not as much of the focus anymore. But I still implore people to take some time with the metadata that you're putting together. And I think one of the things that really helped me through that time period was just having the benefit of having seen card catalogs. Like, you call me an OG, and I feel like that stands for old grandpa. But, I remember card catalogs, and then the advent of LexisNexis. That was one of the things that really formed my understanding of search engines before I had encountered one. Now, before the internet, or kind of in that Usenet time period, just before Kazaa and LimeWire and all that stuff, you were able to access, especially if you went to a university library, that subscription. If you had Prodigy Internet, you could access LexisNexis, and it was that database full of articles and things that legal briefs. The way it did abstracts and the way you searched for things, I just had a knack for finding topical articles for research papers. I was always at the library helping other students figure it out. And, for me, it was in the crafting of those abstracts that I understood the importance of that title tag and that description tag early on. I still think that is one of the mechanics that's faded in terms of being top of mind with a lot of SEOs. And I think that you'd be surprised how much you can get out of just going back to the basics and really tuning those two things up. And I think that's become a tactic that has kind of simmered down in terms of where people prioritize its importance. But to me, it's still one of the most important pieces that I would look at. Because people search for things the same way they did, whether that was on a card catalog or the very early LexisNexis or card catalog library searches on those early like IBM PS2s. But that never changed. And so if you are trying to lead people to information, I still think that mechanic, whether it's an encyclopedia or Google, has not changed a lot. Being really focused and well thought out on those two parts can be very beneficial and still yield a lot of traffic gains if you're thinking about it strategically.
Do you have a certain format that you kind of stick to for, like, maybe if it's a local SEO campaign? Are you like a money keyword geo brand person, or are you like it's never the same? It's just kind of individual per page.
With local, it's a pretty interesting story, and I think that with local, the way I like to consider it is when you are doing that SEO, you're at an advantage for one reason. You're somewhere where Amazon can't be. You're in a pond they can't play in, right? So you have access to that local 3-pack. You have the ability to hit those near me terms. And as you know, the trend in terms of searches with regard to intent for activities or buying of things near me tends to pop up a lot, right? Isn't it like 40% of all search now includes near me as a component? So I like to try to capture that vernacular. I think it's speed on the local pages that matters, and that's how diligently do you want to change your local offerings with seasonality. And in my mind, the places we've won have been in changing, what we're doing with each season, but having the willingness to change and rotate that content quickly and make it very topical. Now, in doing so, what we found is we're really able to hit a lot of that seasonal near me search, especially as it pertains to food. Seasonality affects us with each holiday, with each special occasion. And for us, changing that local messaging to fit those occasions, and now this creates a ton of work for the local search team that we have at Albertsons, and they're always willing to flip and change the messaging, the content. And the caveat there is it has to be good content. It has to be relevant to what's happening in that division, what's happening in that cluster of stores, and does it tie in with things like Mother's Day that's upcoming? So when you're looking at the different categories you have locally, whether that's like bakery or floral, if you can mark in there, Mother's Day cakes, Mother's Day flowers, Mother's Day this and that, um, you know, I feel like local is one of those places where if you're rotating those content pieces, and you're using text that's relevant to the products on your page or the events that you're promoting, that tends to be highly successful. And again, going into a space where you're removing Amazon from that race. And I think when you can set it up such that your primary concerns are going to be the Walmarts of the world and other sites that are sprawling, that do have brick and mortar locations, you're always at a benefit because from years and years of seeing Amazon just how much of a search machine they are from top to bottom, whether you're looking at it from an engineering standpoint or a content standpoint. I mean, they just have the best of everything. So anywhere where I can duck a fight with Amazon, I'm always trying to figure that part out.
I agree with you. I think we have a similar approach, but here's a hot take. Well, maybe it's not a hot take, but you don't hear it said enough, I don't think, is if your campaign's focus on local SEO, you need a really well optimized website, not
Mhm.
so that your site is going to be ranking naturally in the traditional SERPs, but it's because you're a well optimized site combined with proximity is what's going to prop your GBP up in the map pack. So to your
Mhm.
point, one of the massive advantages of being in the map pack, besides it's super transactional, is the fact that an Amazon can't play in there, and
Yeah.
Indeed or a Monster or some of these job sites, they can't play in there. Glassdoor, Wikipedia, they can't play in those spaces. So that's a huge advantage if you can rank in the local map pack. There's a lot of ways of doing it, but
Mhm.
again, if you have a well optimized site, you're going to prop up your GBP. And if you're like a professional services business where you don't have a brick and mortar, where people are you're not generally having transactions there, 70-80% of your leads are probably coming from your GBP off site. But you can't just have a GBP alone. You need to have a really well optimized site, given the good user experience, because Google's crawling. It's
Mhm.
just it's a Google.
Mhm.
The internet is just a big tangled mess of of websites and URLs, right? So the more clear and concise you can make it, the better it's going to be. So another pro tip: your GBP is there to get propped up, in my opinion.
And touching on what you said, Shane, the other piece is if you haven't noticed in some of the queries, when you look and you're typing something in and you see that local 3-pack, you're going to see website mentions, whatever it is you were talking about. So to your point, having those pages that are very well topically explained is going to benefit you in that local 3-pack because Google is, like you said, indexing all of your maybe non-local pages. But when somebody locally is searching that, you'll always see that little globe in the corner that says website also mentions, and then they'll
Mm-hmm.
add that keyword. But that's part and parcel to what you've highlighted here, and very on point. I'm in full agreement with you.
Yeah, it's just really interesting. Google's made such an emphasis on local search, both, organically, also through paid. But if you look at the SERPs now, like before, you used to have to type in like near me or Dallas or Chicago or whatever, and you get the map pack would trigger. Now though, even if you search for like F-150 or Toyota Camry, you still see
Hmm.
localized searches popping up, both
Hmm.
in the map pack and just traditionally, right? You'll see F-150s near me in the title tag, right? Cars.com or whatever it might be. So localization is so important. And if you've ever wondered why every time you do a search on whether your desktop or mobile, Google always wants to know your location. You're like, why do you need to
Yeah.
know my location? I'm just asking like, how to figure out my max bench press if I can do this many reps. Well, how's that localized? But they always want to know because proximity matters so much. So whether you're a national brand, a regional player, local SEO is gonna be part of your strategy if you're trying to win.
Yep. Oh, agreed. I think it's a growing part of what we're doing. And if you really look regionally, and let me give you an example. I think you spent some time at Neighborly, right? And
Mm.
you would know, perfectly based on trying to lead gen for something like that. It's not a simple proposition as a national trying to represent like remodeling of a bathroom in Bloomington, Indiana. It is not going to be easy for that national site to hit unless there's a local brand there. But when you're trying to compete like that, like an Angie or something to that effect, if you don't have those brick and mortars, and it's tough. It's tough. You've got to have a really strong local strategy and a well recognized brand nationally in order to be able to penetrate. But not an easy proposition if you don't have some of that local flair, some of that brick and mortar element. And I think that's been one of the things I've enjoyed when going back to a corporate store that does have so many brick and mortars. Like I said, I'm one of those people that my mindset is also a lot like an offensive coordinator. I'm going to take what the defense is giving me. And in my mind, a lot of the times when I've got the advantage of those brick and mortar locations, maybe it isn't the most exciting SEO play on the planet, but it is some solid bread and butter. And in my mind, that's as good as handing the ball to your fullback on the goal line.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just so dependent on who you're reporting to and what you're getting judged on, right?
Sure.
What if you're at an agency and you have clients, obviously revenue is going to be what they care about the most.
Hmm.
But we all know that SEO is a long-term play. It's not a sprint. You're not going to get the immediate results like you can in other channels. So, in my opinion, traffic and rankings are just kind of milestone indicators of success, but ultimately
Hmm.
it's revenue.
Hmm.
So, uh, yeah, to your point, I think it's just the safe play might not be the sexiest play,
Yep.
but it also completely depends on what is success to your leadership team, to your client, whoever you're reporting to. It's going to make that's making the budgeting decisions. What matters to them the most? I think I've shared this story on the podcast before, but one of the most interesting clients I ever had was really successful from an SEO metric standpoint. Just crush traffic, crush rankings, crush leads. GDP calls were all time highs. I thought I was going to go into the contract renewal part and just like I'm not for like double the contract because like all this stuff. I thought we were going to get a bigger paid search budget. It's one of the only accounts I've ever lost, and the reason I lost it was because they only cared about one keyword, and it was something about like a family drama where someone broke off from the family to start their own company, or maybe it was like an in-law or something, bad blood. They only wanted to outrank that the other brand for their unbranded. That's what all they cared about. So lost that account, but it just goes to show, understand what value is to whoever you are reporting to.
Yeah, and you're so right about that, Shane. Like sometimes, perception is value, right? And it's just what is the perceived value to the organization you're at, and it's really about understanding your audience in that regard. But it's different, right? I mean,
Yeah, so to your point about local SEO and having a brick and mortar, what advantage that is, I can't go into detail about what company I was working for at the time, but pretty recently we did a really cool case study that compared physical addresses to service area addresses, and businesses with a physical address actually had 3 times the amount of leads than ones that had a service area. And it didn't matter which vertical we were in. We tested multiple verticals, and the data was very clear. So you saw on one hand the business with the physical address, they actually showed up more too. So year over year growth there, where service area businesses had year over year growth or decline. So it's very, very fascinating. If you have a brick and mortar, definitely take advantage of it. If you're a fringe business and you can get a physical, oftentimes, it is going to end up paying for itself in the long term. It's not financial advice. I'm not telling you to do it. I'm saying it was an option. It's worth exploring.
fair in terms of a disclaimer, and I think that's where I would say local SEO has really been one of the differences that stick out in my mind very sharply, comparative to what you were seeing in the late 90s, the early 2000s. And, to your point, Shane, if you've got a brick and mortar, take advantage of that Google business page, fill it out properly, look at all the things that you can feature on it. Going through that and just being thorough with all of those details is a big help. And it's just, if you've got a local business and you haven't put one of those together, and that's not a focus of what you're doing, that's literally surrendering one of the biggest advantages that you can have as a business, I think, online. In particular, because that local 3-pack sits over, the rest of those organic listings. It's almost the same as having a sponsored ad that you're not paying for, in my mind. And I think where you can have a listing that is featured like that, it's always to your advantage. As you know, you can hide dead bodies on the second page of Google, even though they've switched to infinite scroll on a lot of browsers. But that used to be a joke when the internet was older, I guess. I think that's a more recent thing, right? Like the page numbering and all that.
The best place to bury a body is on page 2 of Google. That was the joke, right?
That used to be, and then infinite scroll came through, and now it's just hard to tell where page 2 is. I guess mentally it cut it off at 10, but certainly that whole component with being speedy locally is another thing. That if you want to know where page insights and page speed, stuff like that matters, is in a local competition. You don't have to be as good as Amazon. You don't have to have that gorgeous 96 score that they get on their Google page, its page speed insights component. And when you're looking at other local businesses and you see that they're ranking around a 30, they're ranking around a 40, 45. That's where you can take a pretty middle of the road page in terms of its performance and get a lot out of it. So just another thought in terms of how you're picking certain battles, right? And you always want to pick the pages, I think, that are also in a cluster of peer sites that aren't performing at the same speed and range as Amazon. And that gets a little bit hard. You can almost out content them in some regard. Let's say, for example, the CLS changes because somebody's put a banner on a page. Well, like places like Amazon have their CLS down to a science. They can rotate all kinds of disruptive banners and still not pay a price for it. Whereas I think it's much harder for us to implement different sized banners. So sometimes you'll have a CPG that's paid a really nice amount to be there, and that banner just causes a layout shift that's painful to deal with. And unfortunately, you don't have the same resources to do things to combat that or to get it to fit or work. So you're just kind of stuck knowing your CLS is going to
Yeah, I
tank for
think
about 5 weeks.
Core Web Vitals is just
8
so
weeks.
interesting, right? It was all of the rage for all of 3 to 6 months, and then people kind of forgot about it. Now there's INP, so people are starting to talk about it again. But one thing that I think hasn't changed is it's still relevant to your market and your competitors. So if all of your competitors are failing and you're passing, you're probably good enough. If everybody's passing and you're failing, that it probably becomes a higher priority for you. But I think also the niche of your website plays a massive role in terms of prioritization. So if you are Amazon and you're doing hundreds of millions of dollars a day, then yeah, user experience, CLS, core vitals is going to be really, really important. If you are a doctor or a dentist and you get 6 people on your website a day, is it really worth a $15,000 website rebuild to try to pass core vitals? Maybe not. Maybe it is. Maybe it's not.
Right. No, and I think you're totally right with regard to it. It depends so much on where your peer group is. And then again, if you're a local orthodontist and you're just trying to take out the ortho down the street, you're probably not going to need a huge rebuild of a Core Web Vitals optimized site to do that. I think in a lot of cases, just being good with your local 3-pack and having a pretty well built out site that just has good structured data on it should be enough. Now in where you're trying to split hairs and you're in a pretty big firefight, that's where having that faster page probably matters. That's where having, less LCP, like a quicker time to load, where all of those types of things, the INP starts to come into play. Now, I can tell you for certain, just from having watched it for a long time, with our domains and our banners, that we see a difference. And the upshot is never drastic. It's never that you see something go into the red and then all of a sudden you've lost like 30% of your traffic. What you'll notice is a gradual slope, right? And you'll see a correlating ebb and flow when those red bars and those yellow bars start popping back and forth. You'll notice a change. You'll notice a little bit of a positive upthrust when things turn green. You'll notice. So there is an impact there, but to your point, and I like how you look at it, Shane, it's so dependent on who you're competing against. Now, unfortunately, being in the grocery space, Amazon does do grocery. So, and Target and Walmart both do grocery, and those are corporations that do have resources that they put on things like that. They're very well defined in terms of how and why they do all of those things. And they're also they're a good model to look at in that regard as well. And as you know, we're always kind of SEOs, a lot like the NFL. It's a copycat game. And, you see something working for another business, you're going to go experiment with what they're doing, what your interpretation of why what they did worked is. And so that's it's kind of my take on when you're looking at it, with Amazon, or you're looking at it with Walmart. Generally for me, I'm always trying to look for a fight where I can omit one of them and just kind of focus on the other. And then where you got to go heads up, you have to pick your battles wisely. There are certain things you're just not going to win at. It's going to be hard for example, a grocery store pharmacy to just beat a full-time pharmacy like Walgreens or CVS across the board with all the things they do. But you've got to find, those avenues where you can fit in, as you're never going to be the full authority by Google's
What's the
definition.
thought process
they're always
for like
going
a
to favor a
pharmacy?
full-time pharmacy.
Can they have their
over
own separate
part-time.
GBP if it lives within inside a grocery store? Yeah.
That's a very fuzzy. It's a very fuzzy gray area. That's kind of like we also have a floral area. Can we have a florist section? We have a bakery. Can we have a bakery GVP? Now, the answer I've gotten from Google directly on the matter is, does it have a different POS system? As in, is it being charged differently from other parts of the store? And does that department have its own unique phone number? Now, if you qualify in one or both, your own phone number or your own POS system and a phone number, apparently, yes, then it is okay to have them. If you have the same locale, same address, and no difference in phones, no difference in POS system, then they tend to have more of a problem with it, and they will take those pages down. Now, there are places that have ghost kitchens, and I think maybe you might remember, during the pandemic, Cheshire put out some sort of chicken, and it was just a brand of chicken that was coming out of their kitchen. It was like a shared kitchen. Now, the reason they were able to get a separate business listing for that chicken had specifically to do with different POS system, different phone number. And that's what I learned, because we had competitors, and I won't name one of them, that was doing this for their floral department, doing this for their bakery department, doing this for all of their different departments, but they didn't have a different number. So when I went for clarification with Google, I used them as an example, and Google said, no, you can't do that, and it also took their pages away. But again,
I mean,
I'm
it's
not name them, so
it's
can't be theoretically mad.
I always give the SEO world a ton of credit for being extra creative in how they interpret things, right? I mean, because you have precedent, right? There's like car dealerships, they have the sales department, and they have like the service department. Same address, same everything, two separate GVPs. So there definitely is precedent, and it's kind of like, how can I take advantage of that for whatever business I have? But I've always been curious about grocery stores in that sense. Like, even like, the ones that have like a Starbucks license, like, is that like, does Starbucks have their own GBP for that, or does that have to live under the umbrella of a grocery store or a Target or? Yeah. Yeah.
Starbucks has their own port. That's the answer. Because we have Starbucks in our stores.
Right.
Yeah, they
Different
do have
POS.
their own. And that is an exception that is made again. Different number at that kiosk, different POS system at that kiosk. So that's your answer there. And that's one I happen to have a lot of familiarity with because that's one that I've been
Sure.
confronted with
Yeah.
numerous times. Whether it has been for a Starbucks or like a Key location, right? We have those Keymaker kiosks and other things of that sort. So that's the answer there. And I'll just say this: like it never hurts to try. The worst that Google can do is say you can't have that page, and they can take it down. But like I said, it never hurts to try. If you think you have a shot at getting one of those pages, I'll try it. See if it sticks around. Just don't do anything that's going to get you penalized. Don't do anything that's dishonest. But it never hurts you to try to open a business location if you think you have an opportunity to be one in a shared space.
Sure.
There's plenty of places like in Chicago that just have businesses that all share one building with different suites, and that's also, again, though, those suites all have different phone numbers and a different suite numbers. So just those things that delineate a real brick and mortar. But to me, it might just be about
Right.
getting additional phone numbers. Not that I'm seeding that in your mind or telling you to do that, but
Yep.
if we're
Yeah,
in
this
your
is just
shoes
all
and you're somebody
hypothetical.
that's trying to figure
But
that out, that might be what I do.
just for the record, everything we talk about is hypothetical. Much like everything in SEO is, right? And I think, I think that's actually a good point to make is, when you're the number one reason that SEO people lose accounts or lose budget or lose whatever is they don't set expectations properly from the get-go. So it doesn't matter if I've ever been in an agency or in-house position. I'm trying to convince whoever my audience is, client, leadership team, board of directors, whoever it is. I'm trying to get them to believe in me and my methodology and my take on how we do SEO. It's all theoretical. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's not rocket science. In 2024, we have access to so much great third-party tools and data and able to reverse engineer things. It's about doing it better once you have that strategy. And that's always my number one thing. It's like, I can't guarantee you anything other than this is how I believe we should attack this problem. And here's the milestones and indicators along the way that we need to agree upon up front. So I know I'm not just BSing you 6 months from now if things are or going well or aren't going well, right? So expectations are super, super important. But at the end of the day, SEO is so theoretical. Anybody that tells you it's an exact science, I think it's probably pulling a fast one on you. Do you agree? Different take?
Yeah, I'd agree. There are two things when somebody says it's an exact science. Generally, that sends a red flag up for me. It's the other people that say it's art. It's those two statements that dually send up a red flag for me because it's the people that are like it's art. I'm like, that's I don't know. To me, I'm like that's a lot of supposition. That you're slipping into it. That's probably you not wanting to say that you don't know a lot of mechanics. You're sort of just throwing things out there and you're referring to it as art. But generally, if I had two big detectors, it's the people that would want to say it's an exact science, and it's the people that want to say it's an art. That generally, I want to stop listening. Like when I hear that, but that's through time. Those are the two things that have always kind of set off a red flag to me. And it's like to your point, Shane. It's the people that said the exact words that you just said, which is none of this is rocket science. Okay. The minute an SEO person tells me that, I know that that's a pretty honest SEO that I'm working. Because it's not. And SEO is the complexity of 100 or 200 super basic things. And each one as its own basic thing is incredibly simple. Now, it's how well can you stack incredibly basic things together to compose something that looks complex and complicated. And so you might get fooled by seeing 10 super basic things layered together that an SEO person innately understands, but it's the same difference as how well do you understand the word gum. To some people, they hear that word and it just means chewing gum. To other people, they hear the word gum and they're thinking a million things, right? Like gummy substances used in tires, phenolphthalein agar, gum trees, the gums around your teeth, tires, corrugated, all of these types of things depend on how well you understand the first basic building block. And I like to liken that to the word love. Like when you were 3, you thought you understood the word love because you did, right? But as you aged, you realized how much more goes into the understanding of that word, how much it itself can evolve. What you're gleaning from that simple one-word phrase. Now, some people just think love is like and then they stop. They're like, I understand it. My notion of what that is was understood at 3. Everybody knows what that is. Now, there's other people that have philosophized and written books about that, and they understand it as so many different things that they've pulled in, things that are not just the cotton candy and fluffy connotations of the word, but the pain and grief that comes with it, all of these different things. How much complexity can you stuff into something that's super basic? How well do you understand it? And in my mind, the way I try to look at it is, I always think of myself as a kid, right? And I say, well, I thought I understood the word love the same way I thought I understood the word gum. And at 5, it meant this and this. And the basic understanding of it was there. At 30, my God, it means so many other things. At 40, I'm just like, wow, I didn't know what I was thinking at 30. And when I think about how well I understand each basic building block, I should say each understanding of something that should be simple has grown in its complexity and what it means. And then your ability to stack all of those building blocks together, that's when it becomes a concerto
Yeah,
of a
I think you
really,
said
really
that
complex
very
looking
elegantly, a lot better than
strategy.
I
But
could do.
again,
But
to
at the end of the
your
day,
point, none of it was ever rocket science.
SEO had never had, it was never really taught in schools, universities. There's people, like yourself, like Bruce Clay, etc., that kind of built the foundations for the next generation. So for me, I've been in there for like 13 years. You've been in it for Google, so you're 20 years plus. And a lot of it is just pure taught, right? So, today in today's world, if you are a student at a university, you take an SEO class or they mentioned it, like interested in it, definitely pursue it. It's great. The thing that you have the advantage of now is you have a million YouTube videos, you have mods, you have Search Engine Land, you have Search Engine Journal, you have conferences. There's all of these crazy things you can learn from and all these amazing resources, even LinkedIn, Twitter SEO, right?
Yeah.
Amazing, endless resources where for someone like yourself and some of the other pioneers of the industry, it was self-taught. So to your point, it's not a rocket science.
Sure.
It's something that people just have to, you understood from the beginning. It's evolved over time, but people are able to pace it, right? And I think that's what's so interesting about EAT, right? Adding the experience element. If you think about what ChatGPT is in Google, or the dichotomy between the two, it's so funny, right? ChatGPT came out, and then Google reacted. They probably launched Bard and Gemini a little bit too quick because they were so afraid of losing market share, right? But then ChatGPT's been out for a little bit, and then what does the SEO world do? They immediately try to take advantage of ChatGPT AI content to rank better at Google.
Sure.
It's like chicken or the egg, right? It's outdated content. It's from 2016, it's from 2023, or whatever it might be. But it's just very interesting how the world of SEO works, right? You have the white hats and you have the black hats. White hat people like yourself or myself that just kind of learn from each other and best practices. We're not trying to overcomplicate things. We're just trying to get really good at certain elements that we know are repeatable and that work time after time. Going back to the earlier conversation, meta tags. That's something that's been around forever.
Sure.
Maybe meta keywords disappeared a little bit, but meta tags have always been important. So yeah, I don't think you don't need to overcomplicate it. At the end of the day, humans are what drive the internet to make it great, right? And AI is learning off of humans, period.
I agree. Yeah, I agree, and that's one of the things that I think that if there's something that I would like to impart on an audience, it's wonderful that so much is out there for you to reference with SEO, which is a lot different, I think, than probably when you started or when I
Yeah,
started. There was a handful of places you could go, and usually you were anecdotally just trading techniques that worked, or you were looking at the other guys that ranked, people that ranked. My apologies. You're looking at the other individuals who were able to rank well, and you were just looking at what technique they used, why you thought it worked, and then you were just taking your own cracks at it. Now, part of that, though, I think, and this is one of the things I really would like to touch on, is just because you read something doesn't necessarily mean that's the end all be all and that's how it is in SEO. That's another person's interpretation of it. They might have run tests on that worked on their website, but that's not your website. That's not with your dev team. That's not with your analytics team. What worked for them, it may be a completely different story when you unpack those mechanics and try to roll them out on your side. Now, there's some things that all of us can come together on and agree that, yes, this is likely the truth with regard to SEO. There's a lot of stuff that you've got to figure out on your own that's going to be unique to your site, your business, your devs. And it's that part that I feel like all of these help journals, all of these answers, all of these blogs tend to cookie cutterize things. And what you're finding in a lot of SEO agencies in particular, and I don't mean to pick on them, and I kind of do at the same time. Is there more concern with checking boxes that fit the mechanics of SEO? Here's the keyword research I did. Is it realistic for your business? No, it's just the most voluminous stuff related to your business. And here's how I was taught to write a meta tag. Is that going to work for your page and the writing that's on your page? No, that's how Neil Patel said to write meta tags. That's what I memorized. That's what we do. We're checking boxes. And then the question becomes, are you really doing SEO, or are you just copying the motions of what somebody told you SEO was? Now, let me give you an anecdote with that. If I were to take a basketball and I spun it on my finger and I talked about the moment that the centrifugal force and the physics behind it felt right. Now, you could read about how to spin a basketball, and you could hear about the force balancing, and if you took a test about it, you could write those answers down. The truth is, only the people in the room that ever actually got the ball to spin on their finger understand the feeling I'm talking about, that moment it's balanced. Right? So everybody could have the right answer in the room if I sent out a test and said, describe that centrifugal moment. Having heard me speak about it and then having heard others speak about it, you could write the correct answer down. If you've never actually managed to do that, you still don't know what I'm talking about. That's the difference between information and knowledge. And I do think SEO folk, especially in 2024, are a little bit more dependent on the information that's out there versus their own referent and original knowledge. And there is a lot to be said about being an original, figuring things out yourself. Now, if you came from your own path of experimentation and you figured out a mechanic, now you're reading about that same mechanic in someone else's SEO journal.
right.
Now you have knowledge, right? That's not going in reverse. Going in reverse would be reading that mechanic on someone else's blog and having that answer. And I think people have answers in their head the wrong way, as to what an answer is. The real answer is you came to that conclusion on your own and confirmed it by reading someone else's blog. Because now you don't have information, you have knowledge, and you have knowledge that's shared.
That's amazing.
And
I think that's the biggest takeaway of this whole
and you look
episode.
at what someone else has
Information
written in
versus
a
knowledge.
blog,
That's exactly how
you've
people should be
concluded the
thinking
same
about
thing
creating
through
content,
your own different
right? And that's what
experiments.
Google's aiming
Now
for
you have
too, right?
truth.
Is the experience
There's a big
is
difference.
different than the information, and you combine the two, and then you get the knowledge. I think that's super smart. Another thing you hit on was kind of like the agency version of SEO, which is checking a box. And I think that's so interesting and topical because I call those NPC SEOs, right? It's like You got to be a main character if you're going to survive. And you see comments all the time that's like, "Hey, oh no, AI is coming for SEO jobs," and I've always been like, "No, they're not. I'm not worried about it at all. Not for a single iota." But
Oh, I like that.
so I think about it, and it's like, yeah, there are those NPC SEOs, and all as you're doing every day, your job is doing title tags and image alt text and keyword research, mining for the highest search volume. That is exactly what AI can replicate. That is information. There's no knowledge there. So the other thing you touched on was just kind of, it's going to look a little different every single time. The analogy that I give is SEO is a lot like a golf swing. There's no such thing as perfect. Everyone's is going to look a little bit different because, body types or the way your brain works, different experiences that you've had. But all of that is going to lead to your own personal knowledge. But if you're not testing it yourself, then I think in today's modern world of SEO, people are so afraid to test a hypothesis for themselves and measure the results because they're so afraid of failing that they'll have no content for LinkedIn or for Twitter, right? But you learn a lot from just trying it. If you don't have your own website or multiple websites in different niches and you're not tinkering, you're not evolving as an SEO person. And if you're not evolving, then AI is going to come up onto your heels.
Yeah, sure. Agreed. And that's one of the things that I've told people is, you want to know where I've learned the most in SEO? It's been getting in trouble. And early on, that's what I did. Like anybody else, when I was young, I just thought I had all the answers, right? I noticed what PageRank was, and I said, hey, you know what? Webalizer pages get a lot of PageRank. I'm going to write a bot that hits everybody's Webalizer page because they're all PageRank 6. Okay, so I wrote a script that had my domain visiting every one of these Webalizer pages, and I ended up with like thousands and thousands of PageRank 6 backlinks. Just gaming the system, right? And I didn't understand that that's what I was doing. I just said, this is, Google's left this door wide open. I might as well. I didn't know that was black hat SEO at the time Google was new. Like there were no such thing as, there were no analytics. There was Webalizer. There was maybe like Hitbox, that existed around a little bit after that. But Webalizer was just basically a shell of Urchin, right? And those pages used to get a high rank. So I just thought, hey, if the game is page rank, does it matter that this is unrelated content? Is it important that it's a backlink? And that's what I mean is contextually when all of my sites got banned by Google. And I admit now, and this is some 20 years ago. So around 2003, they did an update that ripped all of those backlinks out. And I want to say that was was it Jaeger? Might have been Jaeger. Yeah, and that affected really, that's where I had to reevaluate what I was doing and why. What was the point? Was the point to really produce good content, or was I just trying to rise, into Google? And that's, but part of it is testing the limit, right? Knowing the boundary and coming right up to it. And one of the things that I've said, it makes my VP uncomfortable sometimes, but I always tell my team, I'm like, here's where the boundaries are. And I always want you right here. I always want you right here. I was like, not across, but I always want you right. If you're down here, I was like, I think it'd be better if you were pushing that boundary, finding out where the walls are. Now, you don't have to do anything crazy, but I always want you testing. I always want you trying something different. I always want you thinking about it different. Now, our websites, are 20 of a carbon copy with a different brand, but they're the same site over and over. And I won't give you too many details, but you can imagine if you're a national brand and you want nationwide coverage, but you have totally on the same website and it's identical across the board. That can be a little bit difficult to deal with, right? In terms of geo, in terms of understanding which domain is being prioritized. How do you get all of them listed? And then you get the question like, hey, one of our banners is not anywhere on the front of Google. And I was like, we have 22. So if I was perfect and I beat everybody across all 22, guess what? One of your banners is still going to be 22. Just like, It becomes a pretty entertaining or a set of points to have to make, but there's no simple answers. Every situation I've ever been in is a lot different than the one I was in previously. And that's required a lot of experimentation, especially and mind you, where I got my beginnings was at Playboy, and prior to Playboy, it was actually with like Adult Check and Flint Digital. So those were all places that, if you want to talk about where Black Hat was born, it was born in that industry. And so for me, that was the norm early on as a 19, 20, 21 year old that was really breaking into search. I was looking at what those folks were doing, what the adult industry was doing, and most of that was finding ways to game and defeat Google using nefarious methodologies. And if you weren't in there in that cesspool doing the same thing, you weren't also ranking. And so, over time, I started to look at the differences, the ferocity in competition, and I'm looking at corporate, and I'm looking at things that are maybe not of the adult entertainment space. That's when I really started to look at it a lot differently in terms of what kind of content is there, originality, what are the nice things I can put out there that actually benefit a person. And it's been refreshing. Like I said, a lot of the envelope pushing mechanics that I learned came from just doing things
Yeah.
that were
Yeah.
what I saw my peers doing in
Indeed,
that
baby.
particular industry. Now, that came with a lot of Google penalties as time went by, and especially early on. You may remember it was very gameable. You could buy domains that were just the exact word phrase you wanted, and it would rank like number one. And so you would evolve from things like that to just really always coming back to your milk. And for me, then that was in crafting good title tags, in crafting good content, and as it pertains to this useful or helpful content update. People equate that and they want a generic answer. Is it like too much below the fold content is no longer helpful content and is spammy? And I'm like, no, not in all cases. If the content below the fold is actually good content that's relevant to everything that was on the page, it would still be helpful. That was like, some people look at it and they're like, does that mean we should just cut all the below the fold copy? And I'm like, no, it's just if your below the fold
Yeah, I
copy is
think
this like
you
word
made a joke
cloud
about it
of
earlier
just
about
like
like
gigantic
agency
like
SEO
terms that you
people
want to
and checking
hit
a box and that
that don't
keyword
make sense
research
and
is
aren't
just
a
the most,
relevant and tight
basically
fit to
farm
the
for the
title
most search
tags, to the
volume, even if it is or
content, to
isn't relevant
everything
or
else.
applicable
Then
to your site. But
yeah, it's not going to be
maybe
helpful.
we should give a couple of tips
That's
about
the
what good
definition of
keyword
spam.
research actually looks like. So for me, I would start with focus on the full funnel. Think about an actual searcher's journey. And that's going to have to include both, obviously, lower funnels where everybody wants the near me's, the geos, the deals, the coupons, etc. But upper funnel is super important because you need to be an expert throughout the search journey, right? Everybody in the middle is going to focus on the bottom. So you're probably not going to have unique content at the bottom. You're just not. Everyone's already wrote about it. But if you have that, I like the hub and spoke model personally, where you have your pillar page,
Mm-hmm.
then you have the different blog topics covering upper and mid surrounding it.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people do a good job of linking from blog to pillar page or to service page or to product page. What a lot of people don't do well is link from blog to blog to blog that are topically relevant. So I like to prioritize mine into a primary and secondary category, so it's very neat on a spreadsheet. I know which all the ones that should be linked together.
Mm-hmm.
I tell you that to say you're doing the keyword research the same way. I like to focus on one of those pillar pages or those pillar keywords that we're going to talk about, and I'm trying to build out a search. I'm trying to build out a keyword research funnel that's going to be high, mid, low, or tofu, mofu, bofu, whatever you want to call it, and then local or national keywords, right? So then you have all this list. So that way, I can give this keyword research to you, to a junior SEO, to whoever is going to be doing it. They understand, like, oh, so for this keyword, I need to write. This is if we're going to target this, we need to focus on upper, mid, and lower. Here's some variations. Here's some LSI. Now I can write a really good content brief and give it to the writer so they have a great understanding of, okay, so it's writing about this whole search journey, not just a particular keyword. That's, to me, was what good keyword research is. Anything to add there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Again, to that point of sometimes when you look at the more junior level keyword research that you get, when you're looking at it, you're like, okay, the person that was doing this was just like, here's like 11 home run balls. Let's just put all of these in here. They're going to be excited with these eye popping totals. And, we're going to tell them, how much is available out there. And, you've really got to try to look at a page and take the time to fit and pay attention to the nuance. And I'll liken it to this. We had an agency that was looking at our custom cakes. And they wanted to just put like custom cake and custom cake bakery and all this big stuff on there. And I asked a question, and I looked at the meta. The question I had was, can you tell me why if I put this meta on my page it would never work? Because I already know the answer to this. I just want to know if you do. They were like, well, I mean, we wrote good meta for it. And I was like, okay, now tell me about the page that you wrote the meta for. Did you actually open it up, or did you just look at the topic inside of the spreadsheet and then grab the relevant terms? We didn't look at the page. Oh, okay. So did you notice that there's nothing about like while we're selling custom cakes, did you notice there's almost no custom cake text on there? A lot of it is about sheet cakes. And I was like, there are custom sheet cakes, but you want to optimize this page for custom cakes. Now, it's probably never going to rank for custom cake. But if you can see that every product on here is a sheet cake of some kind, you might rank for custom sheet cake, being that like there's 10 products that use that word, that have that in the description. So while sheet cake is not as exciting and it's not just this giant home run ball, you're almost definitely assured to get a good ranking for that, and it gets like 2,900 visits a month. Okay, yeah, that's not going to be like life-changing or business-changing, but if you can get like number 2 for that across a whole bunch of pages, thinking about it in small totals like that, you're going to have that 36,000 volume, 90,000 volume a month by appropriately appending the correct terms. And sometimes, people just want for there to be more traffic than there can be on a page. And that's where you have to be realistic with your manager, with your contractor, and say, look, I understand that you're looking at this and you're asking, well, the single word cake gets 1.2 million. And I'm just going to be like, the honest answer there is your chance of ranking for sheet cake is way better than ranking for cake, because it's just not going to happen. Now, I can tell you that. I can charge you that fee. I can complete research around it. I can have deliverables that are always turned in on time. And if that's what's important to you, then you've prioritized the wrong things. You've prioritized a dog and pony show. You've prioritized like being an automaton. You've prioritized a cookie cutter like program in terms of what accomplishments and success means. And to you, success means checking boxes. Success means meeting dates. And sometimes to me, and I tell this to my team, I was like, sometimes a hard date is nothing I care about. I care about a good answer. It takes you longer to get to that answer. I would rather not have you working toward a date for the sake of having something complete on that date. That's like being a Pavlovian dog.
Yeah.
That's not what you're here
it's
for.
so important.
You
I
are
think the
here
common thread you're
to
going to
give
see from
quality
start to finish of
answers.
this
And sometimes
episode
that
is
takes longer, and I'm not willing
Derek's
to
talking about
append a
building
deadline
layers.
to that.
So keyword research on top of metadata, on top of your body content,
Yeah,
it's all layered on top of each other.
yeah, I'm going to steal
You
this
throw in the
from you.
internal
by the
links,
way.
and then
I will
maybe
give credit,
maybe
but
eventually you offer circular
I
cakes
picked up
and wedding
new
cakes, and
terminology
then
today.
custom
Shane.
cakes becomes a priority or becomes a possibility, because now you're an authority for several different types of custom cakes. But to Derek's point right now, if it's only sheet cakes, that's the only thing that they offer. It's too broad. Get specific, get better placements. As your business scales, SEO will scale with it. But it's a little bit outrageous to start to think you're going to get these number one keywords, even like the one you used before, beef, right? If you don't have the layers of content and the layers of elements, it's going to be inducive to getting number one of answering search intent. And the last thing that I will, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you're not like the USDA, and,
Absolutely. And
it's gonna be a
understanding
little bit,
search intent
little bit
is so
tough if you're not a
important.
governmental
So you mentioned
organization, because
earlier when
generally
something
on those
about
single
going to the
word
search
food terms,
results,
you're going to see the
and I had
CDC,
I had a
you're
thought
going to
trigger
see
that I'm just remembering now. But
the
another
FDA, you're going to
another
see the
good tip is when
USDA,
you're looking
things
at
like that. The
local
Council
SEO
for
search
Dairy
results,
and things like that
study the
will
search results
typically be
themselves.
what's
What
up
is
there
ranking for
first
that
before
keyword?
it's
Is it
retail.
someone's
So
homepage,
just
or
some
is it a
food for
service
thought.
page? Is it a service area page? Is it a location page? What's the pattern there? If you know, I know it's a Finance school, then we're page one. But if you analyze the top 10 positions, what's the common denominator there? Is it a homepage? Is it a deeper page on the site? If you're seeing a pattern, it's like, oh wow, none of the homepages are ranking. It's always a product page. It's always a service page. You probably need to update your product or service page to replicate, because again, it's not rocket science. We're reverse engineering here, right? What elements are they doing really well, and what can we do even better to better answer that search intent? Maybe it's visuals, maybe it's video, maybe it's schema, maybe it's site speed, whatever it might be. But again, you're building the layers there, and I think it's super important. So when you have, it all starts with a good strategy, good keyword research, metadata itself. There is no perfect format, but the metadata needs to be relevant to the body content. Period.
Yeah, you can. And Google's making its own mind up about the metadata too. It'll rewrite the metadata you have. So giving it word banks that flow properly with what is the content on your page seem to matter. And if you give it the opportunity to form coherent sentences based on what you've placed there, it will do that. It will write some of the things you meant to have there for you. But Shane, to your point, there's one more thing I wanted to talk about, which was when you said, go check the listings, right? Go check what's ranking. Is it a homepage? Is it a deeper like product level page? The other component that I want to layer into that is look at the context of what's there to begin with. Is it retail sites, or is it informational sites? Is it government authorities? So let's take the analogy of we're now trying to sell meals and recipes, and this is kind of the trend for groceries. We're really getting into that. Now the thing is, if we're trying to sell a chicken cacciatore recipe, and you Google that recipe in, do you see a retailer? Do you see anybody selling that recipe? No, you just see sites that have chronicled like their different recipes for that. Is that maybe how you're going to win, or should you be looking at ingredients for this recipe? Should you be trying to sell that? It's a lot less traffic, but if you don't see another retail site there, then it's either that you need to build a recipe section that is considered like traditionally information to try to break into that space, or it's about picking something that's retail focused with regard to a recipe with chicken. But it's about, and I could liken it to another analogy with the way we look at it in pharmacy. Now, if you typed in diabetes management, you're going to run into like Mayo Clinic and all of these WebMD, all of these other things. You're probably not going to see a pharmacy pop up for that. So topically, while that is something that you might want to discuss as a pharmacy, you would have to look at maybe what types of terms around diabetes management that are more direct, like compounding. I can't remember what the exact term is. It's like compounding administration of drugs and then things like that. Now, if you were able to liken it more to what a pharmacy is doing with diabetic medications, with filling prescriptions on that, with how to dose that, with assisted programs for those things in house. Now you might have a chance, but that's the whole thing. Is the easiest thing to do is look at the type of site. If you're a retailer and you're not
I
seeing
think
retail sites for a term you
it's
want,
about understanding
you're
the
probably not
neighborhood you're
also
about to
going to
invest
rank
in.
for it just because you put it on there. And
If
these are
you're
those
if you're a
little
donut
things
shop
again.
and there's a
Shane,
business
like you
there's
pointed out, just
there's a
Googling the site
business
and
for
seeing
lease,
what's around
and you
it,
look at the shopping center and there's four other donut shops, is
it
that
makes a
really
ton of
where
sense. And again,
your
it
best
points
investment's
back
going to be?
to
Probably
Again,
not,
not
right?
rocket
Like,
science. One
that's
very
not that,
simple
or
thing that a lot of
you know.
people just
But
don't
yeah, I
do.
think understanding where you're trying to play is a huge ranking fact, is a huge consideration before you start making a ranking play for it. And
Yeah.
again, it all comes down to, I think it's another recurring theme, is it's not rocket science. It's relying on the information you have and the knowledge you've occurred to make the best decision that you can. Um, I think there is a lot of SEOs that have a lot of hubris, and they think that their strategy is just going to be superior. And it doesn't matter what Google's currently showing, that they're just going to somehow fandangle their way up there. And historically, I would say that is a very dangerous game to play. But if you're following some of these crazy Twitter threads where like people are hacking into like Yale University and putting on some crazy articles on there. Up until to now, I would say that was crazy, but right now, I guess it is a somewhat safe strategy if you have access to a high.edu site and you can rank for whatever you want. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, up until the point you get mowed down, but yeah, that's to your point. The so that same mechanic, and I'll tell you, you remember my Webalizer play
yeah,
that I was just telling you about. Well, it was one of the most visited sites I would have were all the EDUs because they were all page rank 7. So naturally, their Webalizer page that was hanging out there publicly to be hit, was also at a page rank 7. And so I was using Yale and all of those types of places to get a free backlink, because if you showed up in their Webalizer stat as a link, your
yeah,
website, that was a backlink to your site, and that's exactly the point. Is those .edus are just over calibrated with goodness from Google, and if you were able to tap into that and utilize backlinks or text from them, it carried a ton of weight. Now, interestingly enough, this March core update is still talking
yeah. It
about
was
expired
online
domain
storage
abuse.
wars.
And that's
It was the
been
internet
a
version of
hack
storage
that's
wars,
been as old as like 2000. People were,
where someone
I don't know
doesn't
if you
pay for it
remember
towards you, and
snap
then someone else
domains,
comes in and bids it,
where you
scoops it
could
up, and
line
all the
up to
stuff is theirs.
snap expiring domains, hoping someone would forget. And if, their grace period ended, you could set a snap tool that just snapped that domain. And if it was a high ranking domain, you would reconstruct the site, but then you would slip in links to other things, and then you would start building link authority. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it was really pretty savage. Now, apparently, that's still a problem that Google hasn't been able to correct, because I'm seeing them talk about really handling that again in this March update, and this problem has been ongoing since like the early 2000s. Like we were always using Snap domains to look at highly ranked websites, and we were always trying to buy those to use the page rank back when the page rank mechanic existed there. And so, a lot of things I'm admitting to you is all
But yeah,
part
like
of the
again though,
experience,
like
that I garnered along the
especially in the
way. And
early days of SEO,
some
there
of it
was
got
no
me in
right or
trouble.
wrong.
I'll be
Everyone's just trying to
perfectly
figure it
honest
out.
with you,
Google was
but I
just still
learned a
trying to
lot.
figure it out.
And
And,
it just reminds me of that,
you
how
talked
much you
about
learn,
PageRank. I remember I got my career
that,
started
that,
in
that how
SEO
much you
because
F
of
around
the site ripoff report. It used to be a
will
PR6, a
determine
PR7
how much you
site,
find out.
and it wasn't black hat
And
SEO. It was
that's
actually white hat SEO. It's just a
crass,
terrible
but
site,
so true.
So it was like it had a black rain cloud over it maybe, but they actually did a great job of getting high CTR engagement because the owners would then comment on it. So my SEO background started with reverse SEO, trying to get those things pushed off of the first page. So I learned a lot of my tactics through that, and including some black hat tactics like buying links, buying EMDs, and word spun content. It didn't really matter at the time. You were just trying to get stuff up and to cover the first 10 SERP results, so to push down whatever anything negative onto page 2, which was in the best place to bury a dead body. So you live, you learn, but it's really nice looking back on it. I know for a fact that 10 years ago, Google took a hard stance on that particular tactic. I will never use that today.
Mhm.
Or some agencies like, oh, we have this great thing. We can guarantee CTRs. Can you guarantee CTR? So I know you're black hat, right? Like, stay away from my sites. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, exactly. Yep, yeah. Anybody that's telling you they can deliver the moon in SEO is generally not somebody I think you wanna be around long term, and it's always going to be the people that tell you it is a slow growth. In terms of SEO, if you're seeing a general trend line rise and it's got a lot of amplitude to it and it's just long running. That's what you want. In SEO, you don't want to see sudden change. Like even if it is for a lot of traffic, that's not necessarily a good thing. I get nervous when I see influxes of high traffic coming in because generally, at times, that's telling me Google's doing something different, and they might have pulled the filter. And it's not always good news when you have more traffic because that can dry up when they reapply a filter. A lot of times, they're pulling certain things out of that filter to let things they want to mow down bubble up. And so it's a lot of trying to understand the ebb and flow there,
exactly.
and really realizing that it's got to be a slow and constant rise, and that everything isn't going to rise at the same time. The backside of SEO, and the harder part to prove and the harder part to get perceived value out of is how much you would have fallen had SEO not been here. Right? The part you can never calculate is how much traffic a business would have lost without you. And a lot of times that's what your job is. It's about mitigating losses. It's about, fixing busts in um, different parts of the site speed makeup, or in people that are overwriting certain components. Or, for example, let's say the site got hacked, and there was hacked content affecting your ranks. All of these different things, is part of your duty, is to mitigate all of those problems. Now, you can never definitively say, had I not done all of those things, you would have lost this much traffic. But a lot of your job is about the traffic, that you never lost for the business, which you also don't get credit for. But that's part of the job is
And
just
I think
stopping
that
losses versus getting
I think that's
gains.
only
And
going
in
to
a
get
lot of
trickier over time
cases,
as
if
geo
you're at a
rolls out,
company that
and
has had its share
the
of
upper funnel is going to get
domain
a little bit
and
trickier to
engineering
track
related
with the way
difficulties,
chat
you'll
works.
quickly
But
realize your
I
job is
think
more about not
that's
losing
probably a good conversation for the
the
next
ground that you
episode.
have
As we're
versus
wrapping this
gaining the
up, Dirk,
ground
do you have
sometimes.
any
And
final
for
words for
the
the listeners?
foreseeable future, it's in stabilizing that site so that it can be put in a position for gains. But sometimes it's about the losses and avoiding them. Yeah. I think in my mind, and I think one of the best parts of our conversation today was just about being original, and experimenting, testing, doing things on your own. You can read about something and you can copy that mechanic. And the thing is, you need to deploy those things onto your own pages. You should see how that's working, but you should always have some of that observation that's unique to you and to your business. There is no one size fits all in SEO, and I'll tell you what, the difference between being one of these NPCs that Shane has talked about and being an original is in testing things on your own. And again, when you've gotten to answers on your own, and that answer matches something that Neil Patel has said to the world, then you can be sure you have knowledge and truth. right? And there's a vast difference between that and just having the information. So when you have the knowledge that pairs to the information, that correlates to the information you read, there's still something more organic. You would be able to redeploy that methodology in ways that are more referent to the knowledge that you have versus just having the information, because you can do a lot less with the information. That's understanding it at a base level. That's literally thinking this input creates that output and it's done and over with. What you want to understand is, when should I use this input to create that output, but what are other outputs this input could affect? See, when you start thinking about that information in those different ways, that's the sign of you having experimented with yourself, because you can take the same work you can take the same mechanic and use it in so many different ways than the one way it was described in a blog by some SEO expert, right? And so that's always what's going to be important to me is, have you taken the information and assimilated it into a meaning
No, I thank you
that
so much
you understand as
for
it
coming
pertains
on,
to
Derek.
your
Really appreciate it.
business?
And just to
Okay,
summarize
and
that
that's
last point,
that's in
if you
my
look at
mind again,
someone like Derek
the
who's had a
difference
crazy
between knowledge
successful
and
career in the world of
information, the difference
SEO and digital
between being an
marketing,
automaton
spanning back pre-Google to
and
where he
being
is
an
now,
original.
you
And the
listen to
thing
him
that I'll
talk
tell
about
you is,
conversations about
originality
local
is
SEO,
so
about enterprise
important, not just
SEO,
in SEO,
etc. You can
in
see all of
every
these are
facet of
original
what you're doing.
ideas. He's
Okay,
had the
because there's
experience.
the book
He's read the
everybody else
information.
wrote,
He's applied
and
it.
then there's
He's
the one that
validated
you're
it.
writing.
And since he
Okay,
has
well,
that unique point of
tries
view,
being original.
combine that with his background in debate team, he's been able to advance his career by making a solid point and a solid strategy, get the buy-in, and then achieve results. So, Derek, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it. I hope you come back. Let's talk about geo and the advance and analytics in the future, some predictions. I think that'd be a lot of fun. But again, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. It makes two of us, my friend. Have a great weekend.
Yeah, sure. Sure, I'd love to come back sometime, Shane. It's been an absolute honor. And, like I said, when somebody I respect a ton as a peer that I just think is one of the more amazing practitioners of SEO has me on their show, I'm incredibly humbled by that, and certainly look forward to joining you for another conversation. All right, thank you. You too.